Welcome back to Embrace the Journey. We often live hectic lives with all technology to try and help us. We've got microwaves, we've got kettles, we've got washing machines and telephones and computers, and suddenly I can be cooking the dinner whilst making a cup of tea, while all at the same time washing our clothes, on the phone to Kenya and emailing Sri Lanka. And with all this technology, you think we'd have more time on our hands than ever before. Yet for some reason, it doesn't feel like that. People often feel like they have no time. So I want to invite you, sit down for a moment and let's focus together on the importance of rest. I wear many different hats in my life. I'm a missionary, I'm a pastor, I'm a friend, I'm a sister, but my main hats are actually wife and mummy. This inevitably means I spend a lot of time in and out of supermarkets. But please, can someone tell me, why is it when you're only buying 3 items in your little basket, that the person in front of you at the checkout is buying a whole month's worth of food? You've waited forever to finally get your 3 little items on the belt, and just as you do that, the empty checkout next door suddenly opens up. This happens to me all the time, and I'm always thinking, I'm too busy for this. See, how many times have you heard, if only there were 25 hours in a day, or if only there were 8 days in a week? We hear words like stressed and burnt out or exhausted being used more and more. Well, this week I want to focus on rest. You see, Jesus tells us to come to me, all you who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. To embrace your journey, we have got to learn how to rest. You know, there's a simplicity of Kenya that I absolutely love, where if I want to make a cup of tea, it's slightly different now because we've introduced technology and introduced electricity to our children's home. But when we first started there was no electricity. So if I decided I wanted to make a cup of tea, I would have to go out with the children and collect the firewood. We'd start a fire, we'd collect the water from the well, we'd boil the water over the fire right until all the bacteria has been killed off. Then if I want milk in my tea, I have to go and milk the cow to put milk in it. And making 1 cup of tea can take an hour. Yet never have I heard people telling me how stressed they are out there. I've never met anyone needing prayer in the village because they're in a state of exhaustion. Yet in the West, this is a common issue. To embrace the journey, we've got to enjoy it. And you can't love life when you're living exhausted. We absolutely must learn to refill the tank, both spiritually and naturally too. You see, if you don't have time to rest, you're just plain and simply too busy. You see, when we rest, many things start to suffer in our lives. Firstly, relationships. You know, tragically, a lot of the time when people are trying to cut time and save on something, the first thing they cut is family time, the very most critical thing, and that's the area that often gets cut because we think we can save time here. And we rush around, and our communication with our spouse isn't always the best because we're rushing by, and our time with kids is so critical. Spending time with our children when they're young is so vital. And actually, sometimes the highlight of my week is doing the simplest things with Josiah. It's sat playing a game with him, or it's baking cookies with him, or just doing something where it's just me and him resting and enjoying each other's company. Also, if we don't rest, our health begins to suffer. You know, how many times have you been in a rush somewhere and so you think, well, I'll just grab something to eat on the go. And as a result, we end up having a bad diet, or we don't have enough sleep because we feel like we're too busy, we've got to rush on and burn the candle at both ends, as it were. But sadly, what really suffers when we don't rest is our spiritual life, because we're not drinking in of the presence of God. Our quiet time with God is the very engine room of our lives. And as Christians, we've got to abide by all the 10 commandments. You see, we're quite good when it comes to the 10 commandments. We're quite good. We know all the 10 commandments in Exodus 20. You know, you should not have any other gods before me. You shall not make idols. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember to keep the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Honour your father and mother. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness against your neighbour. And do not covet. And we're quite good at keeping all those together. We're quite good at following the majority of them. We wouldn't dream of going out and murdering someone or committing adultery. And hopefully we wouldn't steal or lie. But how many of us really obey the fourth commandment? What is the Sabbath? Well, firstly, Sabbath looks to creation. In Exodus 20 and verse 8 to 11, it says this. Verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labour and do all of your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, nor you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor the stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. God himself demonstrates the rest. He demonstrates how important it is. Do you think God did this because he was tired? You know, he'd taken 6 days to make creation. And was he tired? Did he need a rest? No. I believe he was modeling a principle for our lives, the importance of rest. And God himself rested on the seventh day. What's incredible is what would have been the seventh day for Adam and for God was actually the first day for Adam and Eve. They were created on day 6 and put in charge of all the land and all the animals. And so they wake up on the first morning of the job. Can you imagine the scene as they wake up and they say, okay, God, let's get going. What do you want us to do today? And God says, rest. You see, as humans, we want to focus on creation when God wants the first focus of our minds to be on the Creator. We concentrate on our responsibility to God, the work we can do for him, but he wants us to concentrate our relationship with him. It's on that first ever day for Adam and Eve that they learn the importance of entering into rest, and in doing so, they enter into him. So this Sabbath day is the first day for mankind. It reminds us that we're valued primarily for who we are, not for what we do. It affirms that everything that happens has got to come out of our being, not out of our doing. Secondly, Sabbath looks to freedom. So if we carry on reading, this time in Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 12. It says, observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. For the Lord your God commanded you, 6 days you shall labour and do all of your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, nor you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor any of your cattle, nor the stranger who is with you in your gates, that your male servant and female servant may rest as well as you. And remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. You see, slaves work hard 7 days a week. I met firsthand some slave children when I was out in Pakistan, and watching tiny little children who were younger than my own little boy, children of 3 and 4 years of age, getting up at 4 in the morning, making these bricks in the heat of the boiling hot sun. They often wouldn't go to bed until 7 p.m. working huge long shifts. Why? Because they're slaves. But as long as, just like we long for freedom for these precious people, so the Sabbath is a rest day that brings freedom to our very own souls. It refreshes, it renews, and it restores us. At home, the electric breaker often goes in my house. I've got the lights on, I've got the television on, I've got the washer on, the dishwasher on, I'm charging my phone up. Eventually something's got to give, and often the breaker will flip. But it's a signal to say I'm overloading the electricity supply. But how much more so does that happen in our lives too? We become burnt up, trying to do everything and anything, trying to just rush through life. But it doesn't have to be that way. Don't blow your fuse because you've got too much going on in your life. If we try to keep this 60 mile per hour society going on in our own lives, we end up being physically exhausted. We'll also be emotionally drained and mentally kind of scattered and definitely spiritually bankrupt. But God knew this would be the case, and that's why he created the Sabbath. You see, Jesus himself draws away. In Matthew 14, we meet Jesus, who's just been told that John the Baptist has been beheaded. This was his cousin. This was his friend. And in verse 13 of Matthew 14, it says, "When Jesus heard it, he departed from there by boat to a deserted place by himself. When the multitudes heard it, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when Jesus went out, he saw a great crowd, and he was moved with compassion for them and healed their sick." You know, it's at this exact moment where Jesus then goes on to multiply the food and feed the 5,000, and this incredible miracle. But what we often forget in the middle of that incredible miracle was this was Jesus in the middle of his grief. This was Jesus in the middle of his sorrow, at the exact point where he tried to go and hide away. This was then the very point where he still had the capacity to be moved with compassion and feed the 5,000. Verse 22 goes on to say this: "Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there." See, Jesus himself knew the power of alone time with God. Alone time with God is crucial. It's then that we have the capacity to be moved with compassion, just like Jesus ourselves. You see, in the midst of our own sorrow and loss, it's hard to be moved with compassion for other people. But if we know the importance of rest, importance of a quiet place, then just like Jesus, we too can be moved with compassion for others, even in the middle of our own heartache. Sometimes we have issues with rest. We don't know how to rest. You know, what is the Sabbath? Is it a certain day? For some, it's a Saturday. For others, it's a Sunday. But what we do know is it's a full day. It's a full day to rest. Put away the phone. Take off your watch. Release yourself from the expectations of man upon your life. You know, have times when you can have reflection, spending time with God, not just talking to God, but allowing God to talk to you. It's in those moments that we feel replenished. We've got to be intentional about replenishing ourselves, rejuvenation of the body, but also the mind and the spirit. You know, go out for a walk, whatever it is that you need to connect with God. For me, it's walking in a park, it's being by nature, or it's being by water. And there's something about nature and going for a walk that just helps me feel replenished and help me connect with God so that I can hear his voice. Spend time with people who are going to fill you as well. You know, some people are only ever going to drain you. Spend time with people, have friends who are going to help you. Particularly, spend time with God, because that's where you're most going to feel filled. The Washington Post did an experiment a few years ago. It was back in 2007. And they did this incredible social experiment that I want to read with you. I read it a while ago and was just so drawn by it and the importance of rest. So in Washington, D.C., a metro station on Friday, the 12th of January at 2007 at 7:51 a.m., a man with a violin played many intricate pieces of music. During that time, people went through the station, most of them on their way to work. After about 3 minutes, a middle-aged man noticed there was a musician playing. He slowed his pace and stopped for a few seconds, but then hurried on to meet the busy schedule. About 4 minutes later, the violinist received his first dollar. A woman threw the money into the hat, but carried on by, not stopping. She carried on to walk. At 6 minutes, a young man leaned against the wall to listen to him, and then suddenly looked at his watch and realized he had to start moving again. At 10 minutes, a 3-year-old little boy stopped, but his mother tugged him along, hurrying him. The kid stopped to look at the violinist again, but the mother pushed all the harder, making the child continue to walk, all the while he's turning his head, trying to see and hear the violinist. This action was repeated by several of the children, but every parent, without exception, forced their children to move along quickly. At 45 minutes, the musician had played continuously. Only 6 people stopped for to listen for a short while. About 20 of them gave money, but continued to walk at their normal pace. The man collected a total of $32. After 1 hour, he finished playing and silence took over. No one noticed and no one applauded. There was no recognition at all. No one knew this, but the violinist was a man named Joshua Bell, one of the greatest musicians in the world. He played some of the most intricate pieces ever written with a violin that was worth more than $3.5 million. Just 2 days before, Joshua Bell had sold out a theatre in Boston where seats averaged at $100 to sit and listen to this same piece of music. Joshua Bell was playing incognito in the metro station, and this was organised by the Washington Post as a social experiment about people's priorities. You see, if we don't have time to stop and listen to one of the best musicians in the world, playing some of the finest music ever written on one of the most beautiful instruments ever made, then how many other things are we missing in our life as we rush on by trying to make it through? Another issue that we have with rest is sometimes we simply don't trust. You see, to embrace the Sabbath is hard. I meet many people who struggle with tithing of their finances, whether that's 1/10 or whatever your view of tithing is. But Sabbath is actually 1/7 of your time. We have to trust God, that actually if we'll trust him and take time to spend with him on that Sabbath day, then actually we'll do 4 more on the other 6 days than we could if we acted like slaves, rushing around 7 days a week. There's a fast food restaurant in America, and they have built a culture of Sabbath rest into their philosophy of doing business. And this one fast food restaurant could make millions of more dollars if they opened on a Sunday. But they chose to have Sabbath rest. It's owned by Christians, and they understood the value of Sabbath. And as a result, that company is going on to do incredibly well. You see, we have permission to enjoy rest, to be intimate with God, practicing the Sabbath so that you remember that you're not God. He is. You need rest. I want to challenge you to trust God, just like you have with your tithe, just like you have with your finances. Trust him to take time to rest no matter how busy you are. Yes, there are seasons where there's intense pressure on our life. You know, when we have a newborn baby, for example, sleep goes out of the window. Trust me, I remember that well. Or if we're having exams at university or taking on a new project at work, and there's times of intense pressure. But as a lifestyle, we must build in rest, time to recalibrate and spend time with God. Matthew 11, verse 28 is one of my favorite scriptures. It says, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. You will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Another version of the Bible puts it this way: "Are you tired and worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me. Work with me. Watch how I do it." I love this. "Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." There's so much truth there. You know, I once heard a story about a man who was challenged by another big, strong wood chipper. And they had this challenge to how many trees can you chop in a day? And the challenger had worked very hard. He worked tirelessly chopping all these trees. He was in competition with his work colleague, and he was determined who was going to chop more trees than the other guy. So the challenger worked so hard, stopping only for a very brief little lunch. Meanwhile, he kept looking across, and the other man kept having a leisurely lunch and took several breaks throughout the day. By the end of the day, the challenger was determined he must have chopped down more trees than the other guy. He did not stop. He was on it. And so he went across to find out, okay, how many trees did you chop down? And the challenger was surprised and really annoyed to find out that the other man had chopped substantially more wood than he had. He said, "I don't get it. How did you do that? Every time I looked across, you were taking yet another rest. I never stopped. And yet you've chopped down more trees. How did you do that?" And the man replied, "You see, what you didn't notice is all the time I was sitting down, I was sharpening my axe." The truth is right there. See, sometimes when we take a rest in God's presence, it's like we're sharpening our axe, as it were. We no longer work for our rest, but we work from our rest. That might just sound like a bit of a play on words, but the difference between the two is huge. One suggests that we've earned our rest somehow, we've achieved it, we've done our great works, and now we've earned this rest. But the other reveals that actually you can only really do the works that God intends for your life once you've rested in his presence. Once we've rested with him, we're far more able to do the works that he's planned for us. If you want to really reach your God-given potential, you've got to take time to rest in his presence. You know, the Hebrew word for rest is nuach, and it means to be at rest, to deposit, to wait quietly. It's as we wait quietly in his presence that God is able to deposit his spirit into our lives, that we can live out of a state of restedness. We can have a peaceful heart. It's as we almost breathe him in deeply and drink out of his spirit that we not only find our own hearts and lives feeling refreshed, but that we can bring that refreshing to those around us. Just as Jesus, at a moment where he wasn't necessarily refreshed, he just found out about John the Baptist, but he was still able to refresh those around him. Why? Because he had a secret place. Living out of rest brings a consistency to our hearts that lives and circumstances can't suddenly dictate how we feel or how we are. So whether we're up on the mountaintop or whether we're down in the valley, our hope remains on him. Isaiah 26:3 says, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you." You see, you can't trust someone who you don't know. The only way to get to know God is to regularly rest in his presence. I can honestly say it's been in the times of waiting on God, allowing him to refresh my spirit and learning how to hear his voice in my life, that's brought the clearest strategy and focus to the work we do with One by One. Just as our bodies need physical rest to be able to continue being healthy and strong, all the more so this is reflected in our spiritual lives too. It's as we rest in his presence that we're able to go on. Embrace the journey by embracing the rest that God invites you to enter into. You know, don't be stressed, don't be burnt out, but be energized and renewed as you simply rest in his presence. I hope that's encouraged you today. I know we live busy lives, we have so much to do and always so busy with life. But if we focus on rest, we'll see God do incredible things. God bless you.